A silver needle slides into my vein with a clinical, ice-cold precision, and suddenly, the taste of liquid copper floods my mouth. My vision swims, the world tilting on a jagged axis as the ceiling above me blurs into a gray smear. I can't move my arms, but I can feel the chemical fire racing through my bloodstream, claiming every nerve. A woman's voice whispers directly into my ear, her breath smelling of peppermint and something metallic. She tells me not to fight it, that the refinement process requires total surrender to be effective. I want to ask what refinement means, but my tongue is a heavy, useless slab of meat in my mouth, and her voice is the only anchor I have left. 48 hours ago, my world was a different kind of nightmare. I stared at a bank balance that read 0.00, the digital numbers mocking me. My reputation in the art world was nothing but ash after the Louvre Scandal. A disgraced curator with a talent for finding things that should have stayed lost, and a debt that could swallow a city. Then came the invitation, an anonymous heavy-stock parchment that smelled of ancient libraries and ozone. It offered me a once-in-a-lifetime restoration project at a private estate called the Monolith, with a signing bonus of $500,000. For a man who had been eating canned soup for 3 months, greed is a very powerful motivator. The estate was a brutalist fever dream, a concrete fortress stabbing upward into a suffocating blanket of mountain fog. There were no windows, only narrow slits that looked like weeping eyes in the gray stone. As the iron gates groaned shut behind me, a sudden heavy silence descended, the kind of silence that feels like it's listening to you. I was met by Clara, the estate manager, a woman whose poise was so rigid it felt predatory. She didn't offer a handshake or a greeting. Instead, she stepped into my personal space and leaned in, inhaling deeply at my wrist. Her eyes fluttered shut for a second, as if she were tasting the very air around my pulse, before she stepped back with a thin, knowing smile. Clara led me to my quarters, a room that was a sickening blend of marble and deep crimson velvet. It looked like a 5-star suite, but the moment I stepped inside, I heard the heavy thud of a deadbolt sliding into place from the outside. The luxury was a lie. I wasn't a guest. I was a specimen in a golden cage. When she spoke through the door, her voice was devoid of warmth. She told me the master didn't actually care about my credentials or my ability to restore a canvas. He didn't want my skills. He wanted my palette. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't there to do the work. I was the material being worked on. The preparation began on the first day with a sound. They pumped a high-frequency vibration into the room that made my teeth ache, and the marrow in my bones feel like it was boiling. It wasn't just noise. It was a surgical strike on my equilibrium, stripping away my mental defenses until I was raw and exposed. I screamed through the door, demanding to know why this torture was necessary for a restoration job. Clara's laugh was a dry, papery sound. She whispered that the master is a connoisseur of the soul, and he only feasts upon those who have been tuned to a high vibrational frequency. The word feast sent a jolt of adrenaline through my spine. In a surge of panic, I threw myself against the door, then scrambled to the narrow slit of a window. Outside, the fog had thickened into a physical wall of white swirling like a living thing. I saw the perimeter fences, the wires humming with a lethal blue electrical current that promised a charred death to anyone attempting to flee. On the second day, they stripped me and bathed me in an iridescent oil that clung to my skin like a second, shimmering membrane. It smelled of ozone and rotting lilies, a scent that triggered a primal, instinctive revulsion in the back of my throat. My skin began to glow with a faint, sickly light, humming with a strange, unnatural energy. Then came the food, a colorless, tasteless gel that Clara forced me to swallow. Within minutes, the world exploded. Every color in the room began to scream with an intensity that was physically painful. The crimson velvet became a roaring fire, and the white marble shifted into a blinding, holographic glare that burned my retinas. As the gel took hold, I started seeing things that shouldn't exist. The concrete walls of the room began to pulse, revealing ancient, shimmering veins of gold flowing beneath the surface like a circulatory system. The house was alive, a concrete organism breathing in sync with my own ragged gasps, preparing me for something inevitable. Clara's voice returned, sounding closer, now almost intimate. She whispered that the process was nearly complete and that the master was almost hungry enough for a curator of my particular vintage. The anticipation in her voice wasn't for my success. but for my consumption. And I realized the clock was ticking toward a dinner where I was the main course. During a brief lapse in the surveillance, I felt something loose beneath the marble floorboards. I clawed at the stone until my fingernails bled, pulling up a hidden leather-bound diary from a previous guest. The pages were stained with salt and desperation, the handwriting devolving from elegant script into a frantic, jagged scrawl as the entries progressed. The diary revealed the truth about the harvest. The master didn't hunger for flesh or blood. He fed on the capacity to feel. He harvested the peak of human aesthetic experience, the raw, unfiltered agony of loss, the blinding height of euphoria, and the exquisite terror of the end. He didn't eat the body, he ate the soul's resonance. A cold sweat tracked down my spine as the puzzle pieces locked together. I wasn't being restored as a person. I was being seasoned. The sounds, the oils, the gels, they were all designed to amplify my sensory receptors to their absolute limit, making my essence a rich, concentrated delicacy for a creature that lived on the edge of perception. I collapsed against the door, begging Clara to let me go, promising her every cent of the bonus and more. I told her I'd do anything just to see the sun again. You know, if you're feeling trapped in your own life, maybe you should hit subscribe and escape this nightmare with me before the master finds us too. Surprisingly, Clara's voice softened. She leaned against the door and confessed that she hated the master as much as I did. She spoke of the endless cycle of preparation and the horror of watching 100 souls be hollowed out. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. I thought I had found an ally in this concrete hell. She slid a small crystal vial through the meal slot in the door. She told me it was a concentrated protection serum, something that would mask my resonance and make me invisible to the master's hunger. I didn't trust her, but the alternative was standing naked and screaming in the dark. I drank the liquid. It tasted of bitter almonds and old pennies. As I looked at her through the gap in the door, I noticed something that stopped my heart. At the edges of her jawline, her skin was peeling away in thin, translucent flakes, revealing something gray and porous underneath. Clara wasn't a human victim. She was a husk, a creature that had already been eaten and was merely a leftover. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted. I could see my breath misting in the air, freezing instantly into jagged, floating crystals that drifted like diamonds. The light in the room dimmed, swallowed by a shadow that didn't come from any lamp, but seemed to leak out of the very walls themselves. A booming vibration shook the floor, but it wasn't a sound. It was a wave of absolute crushing grief that slammed into my chest, knocking the wind out of me. It felt as if every tragedy I had ever experienced was being amplified and played back all at once, a psychic weight that forced me to my knees in submission. Then, he appeared. The master was a towering, featureless entity draped in heavy, midnight black silk that seemed to absorb all light. Where a face should have been, there was only a vertical, lipless mouth that stretched from where his forehead would be down to his chest, lined with rows of translucent, needle-like teeth. He didn't speak with words. Instead, he projected a feeling of starvation into my mind, a void so vast and hungry that it made my own existence feel insignificant. It was an appetite that spanned centuries, a cosmic hunger that viewed my entire life's experience as nothing more than a fleeting appetizer. The master reached out a long, spindly finger and touched my forehead. The contact was electric. I felt my childhood memories, the smell of my mother's perfume, the warmth of a first summer, being ripped out of me like liquid gold, flowing upward into the creature's void. I was being erased, one precious moment at a time. I opened my mouth to scream, to fight, to beg for mercy, but no sound came out. My throat felt empty, as if the very concept of noise had been deleted from my mind. The master had already eaten my voice, leaving me a silent witness to my own spiritual annihilation. Clara stepped into the room, her eyes gleaming with a predatory light. She didn't look at me with pity, but with pride. She leaned toward the master and whispered that I was the perfect vintage, a disgraced man with a ruined soul and a refined palate, the finest meal he had encountered in a decade. She laughed, admitting she had sold me to the master to pay off her own soul debt, buying herself a few more years of existence by trading my life. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is survival worth the price of a total betrayal? Or is she just a monster in a human mask? Tell me in the comments if you'd sell your best friend for 10 more years of life. The master leaned in, his massive mouth opening wide to inhale my entire consciousness in one final devastating gulp. I could feel the pull of the vacuum, the edges of my identity fraying and snapping as I was dragged toward the abyss. This was the end. I was becoming a memory in a monster's belly. But as the master's essence merged with mine, He suddenly recoiled. The entity shrieked, a sound that shattered every piece of marble in the room, and he stumbled back, his featureless face contorting in a spasm of absolute visceral agony. He clutched his throat, his silk robes billowing like a dying storm. A caustic, metallic smell filled the air, and thick black smoke began to pour from the master's mouth and pores. He was smoking from the inside out, his physical form bubbling and warping as if he had swallowed a star. He tried to project a feeling of rage, but it was drowned out by the sound of his own dissolution. Then it hit me. The protection vial Clara had given me wasn't a shield. It was a concentrated sensory toxin. It was a poison designed to taste like the ultimate delicacy but act as a corrosive acid to a creature of pure sensation. Clara hadn't saved me. She had used me as a biological bomb to kill her master. With one final agonizing wail, the master collapsed. His body didn't leave a corpse. He simply dissolved into a massive pile of gray ash and shattered glass that coated the floor. The crushing weight of his grief vanished, replaced by a hollow, ringing silence that echoed through the halls of the Monolith. Clara stood over the ashes, laughing a cold, cynical sound. She explained that the master's taste had become too refined, too arrogant. He had become so obsessed with luxury that he couldn't handle the poison of mediocrity she had brewed into the serum. He was killed by the very refinement he craved. She didn't offer me a hand up. Instead, she told me that according to the rules of the estate, the master's vast accumulated wealth and power now belonged to the nearest living witness. She didn't save me out of love or guilt. She saved me because I was the legal bridge she needed to inherit the empire. I walked out of the Monolith as the fog finally lifted, my voice returning in a raspy, broken whisper. I had the money more than I could ever spend in 10 lifetimes, but as I looked back at the concrete fortress, I realized the cost. The memories of my home, my parents, my first love, they were gone, eaten by the master. I looked down at my hands and gasped. They were no longer flesh-toned. They were shimmering with that same iridescent, oily glow. I could feel the world around me shifting, the colors becoming louder, the smells becoming textures. I wasn't just a survivor. I was changing. I was becoming a collector. I have the money now, and I have the hunger. I can smell your desires through the screen, your desperation, your little secrets. Now be honest, would you sacrifice every single memory of your loved ones for $500,000? Tell me in the comments why you're wrong, subscribe, or you might just be the next guest at my table.